Clash Disc is coming out with a new technology called the Tone technology. You've probably seen this all over social media, including YouTube, like me. And so today we're going to be looking at the new Tone technology, which some people have called an undermold. It's in one of their distance drivers, which I think is one of their best distance drivers if you want some stability at the end, the Salt. And so I actually bought just regular steady Salt, their other premium plastic, that we're going to throw against one another. But a lot of people have been having questions as to whether or not this plastic is going to break, because this one, the Double Steady, some people have had problems with. So today we're going to be playing a Cold Creek disc golf course, all driver-ish holes, just to see how it compares with the typical Steady. But before that, we're going to go into the lab to see kind of how this plastic attaches, my general thoughts on it, and then we're going to see if we can break it. I'm going to have some parameters, normal-ish scenarios, and maybe slightly beyond it, if we can get this plastic to break, like some people have mentioned that their Double Steady has before. Welcome back to the lab. So here we have the Double Steady plastic as well as new Clash Disc Tone plastic. I think the innovation is really cool. I'm gonna have some thoughts on it later during the round that I'm interested to hear your perspective on. Because on one side, I think it's amazing and cool regardless of how it performs because it can push the sport forward. On the other side, I don't know the longevity of it, especially with a smaller company. But when we just take a quick look at these salts side by side, they do look to be pretty similar. Typically the way that discs are molded, at least my understanding, except for MVP who does some overmold, and obviously except for this, there were some problems with this that I don't think we'll have with this for reasons that we'll talk about. But when you look at a disc, you can see there's a line that goes right down the middle of most discs that you'll ever pull out. These are salts. Here's the DX Beast that Innova randomly sent me for the holidays. You can kind of see right down the middle. That's typically called the parting line. You can probably see on this Double Steady that it does have the parting line there, but then it kind of looks like in order to get this little Double Steady pattern, they cut out with, I don't even, honestly, I never quite looked at this, but you can see underneath how it kind of comes up this way, and the whole inside rim looks to be the same plastic as the top, which is super interesting. So they might have kind of undermolded this with overmold. It's basically implied that you have the core and then you overmold it. Undermold, I feel like, would honestly be more of what this is, where they have the main disc, the main mold, and then they undermold some plastic and have some cutout injection points, maybe with like a CNC machine that they filled with the secondary Steady plastic. Whereas this is just kind of typical manufacturing. You would just use a different plastic at the bottom and the top. I'm sure that's a vast oversimplification of it. However, most molds are two big pieces of metal that you fill with plastic and press together, and that's how you get a disc. This has a separate plastic on the bottom and the top, but it does look like they had to in some way change the mold of it because of what is written on the rim where it says Clash Disc Tone. So likely they just added a little bit of metal onto the bottom mold so that you could get that embossment, which I think looks really cool because the bottom is an opaque, not see-through plastic, and the top you can see through, and it does do what I think they were planning on it to do in terms of feel, which is have a very stiff feeling rim. Like this rim is not going anywhere, even though this one is going a lot more places. It's definitely more flexible, but it still feels very grippy on the top where my thumb is, being able to really trust that you can throw it hard, because if you have kind of this gummier, plushier top, which feels pretty much the same as the regular Steady, and I didn't really feel a problem with throwing this, but it is on the gummier side of like a distance driver I would choose to throw, because if you have something gummy like this gummy Seablend Centurion where I can flex this thing all over the place, at least in my experience, the harder that I have thrown, the more I want a firmer plastic because it's not going to warp as it leaves your hand at higher speeds as much, and therefore it's not going to wobble as easily. So for that, I think the feel is right on. Like I would much rather throw a very hard shot with a disc that feels like this than with a disc that feels like this. Now where we do run into some maybe quality control issues or just the fact that this is a prototype and they are going to be coming out in March, so we still have some time before that. Plus they sent these to me like 3 or 4 weeks ago, so these are definitely more on the proto side than the factory run side, at least I kind of hope, based on what we're going to talk about. Because if you can kind of see right where the parting line meets, maybe this is just how they had to put them together, but you can see kind of that like ribbing lookingness right there. Seems to be like a little chunk out of there. This is all how it came to me. I know you see some dirt, but this is kind of what the parting line looks like as we move around the disc fully. Most of it looks pretty good, but then you have some spots that seem to be a little overshaved, whereas most of it does look fine. Now honestly, I don't know why this caused this to be as flat as it is. There's almost like shoulder and then not quite a puddle top, but like you might be able to argue for it. We'll actually do a quick water test to see if this does have any puddle top to it. Shout out my buddies Erlen and Graceland for the beakers. I'm holding this flat. See if there's any puddle top to it. So, I mean, the water is just hanging out on there. I mean, it does seem to dome off, but I think you could call it pretty puddle based on that experiment. If not flat, here is just the normal salt. So immediately wants to kind of roll off. There is some that stays on there, but there's some that immediately rolls off. Is a Cordolan Scepter, which I think is very similar to a flat Firebird mold, which is tends to be slightly more understable actually than like the FAF Firebirds. But if we put some water on this flat guy, that did have a little more speed to it than the other ones, but there might be a slight puddle top to the Tone Salt. It had the water, the carpet, you know what I mean? Now the reason that I think it has this little ribbing all throughout parts of the matching of the flight plate, and this only comes from my experience of a couple like summers of woodworking for fun. But if you're joining materials together, especially that are not the same, sometimes you need to rough up the surface of one of them so that they can adhere better. So that instead of it just being a flat surface to a flat surface, there's not a lot of friction that can be caused for like glue to catch, or I don't know if there's probably not glue here, it's probably just injection, pressuring. But I would guess that they mold the bottom and then they have to kind of scuff up the surface a little bit on the rim that you see here, obviously not right above this Clash's Tone thing, which is kind of interesting because I thought that I might have found it because that might be the point where it does that, but it actually looks perfect right above this part. So they probably have to score it a little bit where they are roughing up parts of this so that the second material can adhere better to the first material, since it's not all one and the same, and they likely have to wait for the bottom to cool before they put the top on, at least in some capacity. So it is going to create extra challenges in manufacturing, but I do think that the feel of this is very good. Now we just need to talk about the flight, which we're going to talk about on the course for 6 holes, and then we're going to get into a field, try to throw max distance, and then see if I can wreck this thing. I don't think I'll be able to, just based off of this versus this and the differences, and I'm not going to try to wreck this because some people have, and I don't want to because I like this disc. It looks cool. First, let's get you back to Coal Creek. Hope you enjoyed our time in the lab, but we're out here at hole number 1. It's 287 feet up on a mound, so it plays close to 300 to 320. Big shout out to Clash for sending this out to me, by the way. I have heard some things about the flight of this that we'll talk about, but we're going into a bit of a headwind left to right, so the forehand could be interesting. We're gonna have to leave it out wide and hope it doesn't flip into it. We'll get started with just a typical salt, which in my estimation was pretty much like a neutral to slightly flippy destroyer when I first threw it, but I've only thrown it one time, so that could have just been that disc. Okay, I thought it flipped a little bit. That's fine. We're only going to be putting out the tone. I think I'm going to throw this the same because of something that I've heard that I'll tell you about as we walk down there. Yep, I think they're right. So I actually watched Swanky's disc review of this. I think it was one of the first ones that had come up. And I typically don't watch a ton of like reviews of discs that I'm going to be reviewing because I want to give my own opinion. But especially if I just get sent out like one disc or something, it can be helpful to hear some other consensus if there are different colors or maybe slightly different shapes. And what I heard during the Swanky review was that the domier ones were going to react a little bit more overstable and the flatter ones were going to be a little bit more understable. Now, if you guys have known recently, my forehand has kind of not been there. But even on that not super powerful forehand, it flipped up and rode really straight. So I think it's gonna be a flippy bomber, and I don't know if this is a hallmark of the plastic or just this mold or whatever, but it seems that at least for the salts, the flatter it is, the more flippy it's gonna be, based off of a couple things that I've heard. Wow. There we go. Hole 2 is 401 feet, straight ahead there. It is a par 3. They call it par 4 for course pars because it's slightly uphill, probably plays close to 410 to 425, somewhere in there. With this little left to right, if I throw this flat, just to the left of the basket, I think it'll drift for a while. It's just like, that is a very interestingly fast flipping flight. I think the technology is cool. It's gonna be hard because the money and disc, I'll give you my opinion after I throw this salt. Like, that is so much flippier than the other Emperor. That's like a phenomenal disc. It's almost like a faster interval. That might be a little short still. Wow, kind of surprising. So what I was about to say before I was throwing is that I think that these innovations are super cool. Stability does change with discs, but when you add in an extra layer of development stuff, because disc golf is so small and there's so little money in it right now, especially for these type of companies who, like, committing to this technology could legitimately ruin Clash if it turns out to be bad. Because they're not a massive company, they don't have massively diversified revenue sources coming in, and so they're gonna have to make the right bet, which is why I think that we don't see double steady anymore. Maybe they'll come back with that eventually, but that might just be shelved forever. I don't want that to be the case here, because this seems much more interesting and more promising. I don't know if the performance enhancements are going to be there, but I want them to at least do a couple more runs and like really see, but I understand the financial limitations and restraints of that. think I honestly expected the other salt to be a little more overstable instead of glidey. And so still ends up a little short, still inside the circle. I'm hopeful for these technologies to continue improving and pushing the sport forward and being fun. Because honestly, that's what a lot of the fun is in sports besides the pro side. People love technological advances, ways to get better without having to get better because technology gets better. But these bigger sports, they have disposable income. There's not a lot of disc golf companies with disposable revenue to like put into massive R&D projects. And I understand where a company like a Clash will come from, where they want to be the smaller company that stands out because of this. And that's kind of what helped MVP to grow. And then the marketing, but also the gyro technology being bought into, or at least not making the disc slightly worse. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen with all the tone discs. I just hope they put their eggs in the right basket so we can see them around for a while, because I do like a lot of what Clash is doing. Wow, it's kind of, it does flip fast and dump fast, which is the hallmarks of kind of a flatter disc. No chance. We're gonna make a little safari for our fourth hole here. We're gonna play to the basket that's behind the tree we can see. Since we're going into a decent little headwind, we're gonna see how they handle that. And I think this tone, I'm gonna have to put on a lot of hyzer and give it height, because I think it's gonna flip, I think it's gonna turn. And I think there's gonna be a point where it gets back on edge and it's kind of gonna knife out of the sky. Uh-oh. Get left. Wow. Whoa. That went really far, and it just stayed flat. I think I got the nose angle like really perfectly matching the grade of the hill. I expected actually to, I wanted to throw it slightly more nose up to let the hyzer flip a little later and then finish a little harder. Didn't give it enough. Closer though. Regular steady salt, hanging out. Nailed it. I threw it on some people on accident. So we're booking it. I'm really intrigued about this disc on the last hole, because we're basically gonna try to get a max distance rip with it to a basket that's about 530 down a hill. The practice basket from hole 18, because the mid-flight is just what's so confusing to me about this disc specifically. And honestly, I would probably guess that because of the flatness. Like, there's a reason why I don't think I know any pros who throw flat discs in their drivers and or fairways that are not forehand like overstable guys, because flat disc for overstability kind of makes sense, because you want to push it on a hard anhyzer, let it pan hard right and flex back hard left. But flat flippy guys, honestly, to me, just seem a little finicky. These are testers. They might not be coming to market like this, and if they're all kind of where they should be, and if I'm able to get my hands on one and do a little banana froth follow-up, I'll definitely do that to let you guys know, because I think the flight of this with this technology would be sweet, because the feel is really good. I just really, this flight is, it's putting me off of it. See, that's where I think these could work. Even a little more height could be good. We were in a tailwind and it still flipped that much. Like, the wind is kind of pushing straight this way. Like, that's just more normal of like what I think a disc will do. Not good, inside the circle short, but for those two to both be literally new, I'd never thrown them before a single time. It's kind of surprising, the difference, because you'd think adding a harder plastic would make it slightly more overstable, but just didn't. Throwing you guys up on a high hill here. The short basket down there is 409. The basket we're gonna be playing to is beyond it. The sidewalk that's back there, I ranged to like 550, 560. So I think the basket is around 530-ish. We do have kind of a tail right to left, maybe a tail, so it could be a good wind. I'm gonna range find it with just the steady salt and see if we can get a nice big mash with the tone salt. I really wanted to like this more than I did, unfortunately. No, it's too unstable. Dang. All right, with that, I needed it higher, especially in a tailwind, because that thing just held. Thought I hit it to where it could flex. Got one shot, baby. One shot, one opportunity. Yep. Come on. Keep drifting. Whoa. I really thought that'd drift more. That is down there, though. That's a putt. We'll go ahead and make this birdie putt, and then it might be time to see if it'll stay together. Unlike my sanity most of the time. Got it. Let's throw some distance, baby. Do have some wind, so I'm gonna be throwing into a tailwind to cheat. I also brought out a Faro, S-Blend Faro. I'm liking this mold. I don't know if the S-Blends are gonna be my favorites. I'll test it out for the season. We'll start out with this Faro. Okay, lift it out of it, hit my chest. Talon kept it over. We'll now throw this salt. Then we got 3 shots with the tone salt. Here is just the regular steady. That thing is honestly gonna be pretty, like a little more stable than a Faro, I think. Not an incredible amount. That seemed like it was far. I don't quite know how far, but we'll throw this tone guy. I think if I throw it like that, it's gonna get a big pan. So maybe even touch a Heisen. I do love the feel, I just don't like the flight. So, it like flips quick, but then it doesn't drift, and then it fights back hard. It's still not the best wind. It's a little bit over the right shoulder. You want it over the left shoulder for big distance. Then I'd be throwing into pavilions. So we're not gonna worry about that. I think the salt, not quite Faro-like. I think it's much more like my intervals, but actually like a true 12 speed, where the interval I feel like is almost more Wraith-like, where it holds tighter lines. That one I feel like you do have to push over on, and it's gonna pan and finish a little harder. It does look like I got the best rip with the tone salt. The one that I kind of hit my chest and threw bad, Faro right there. Salt just a little bit beyond it, almost to that tree. And then steady salt is over there somewhere. Couldn't really find it with the zoom. I'm gonna guess this is tracked about 10 feet from the tree. Actually, the tree might be closer here, but I'm wrong, 440. Okay, that makes me feel better. I did know I've been throwing pretty good recently. I just didn't know exactly how good. It is tailwind assisted. Actually, I think I can range my camera. Yeah, 463 to the tree from here. So my camera was getting 455, so we'll call it 445 as the first rip. It's 498, so we'll put it right here, throw from there. That'll be 500 feet if we get to that tree. Moving it back so we can see the whole thing. You know, not 500 on the table. And now, Faro's at first. Winds died down though, so now we got nothing. Not quite nothing, but pretty much nothing. Whew! That Faro smoked. That might be, I'm not gonna say it's 500, but out there. That's smoked. Get there, baby. Ooh, that's in the shadow of that tree. Just so we can range back and be legit, I'm gonna drape this over you guys and say night-night, and then see you on the phone. That might be my first 500-foot throw. It's gonna be pretty close. So looking at it now, I don't think the salt got there. But imagine if the freaking tone salt, which I was talking crap on, was the first disc to get 500 for me. It's not. Neither of these are. Smacked though. And this one hit a hillside. Because that's the salt. That's the Faro. Down there. It's pretty in line. That could have got it. The people who are able to do that are crazy. I cannot. 482. This guy, 474. I was getting between 473 and 478. We'll call it 474. I think we're gonna call it there. I'm not gonna try to give him another rip. Kind of want to beat him up, see if it'll take a beating, and then see if it changes the flight at all. We'll give one throw after all this. Just throwing 10 times really hard into that tree, see if it'll break. But again, I'm just one guy with one disc with one opinion on the internet. So is it really worth that much? No. I think other people are doing tests and have reviews. So if you're interested in one of these and are interested a little more in the durability, definitely watch 1 or 2 more of those videos. But from what I anticipate is it's gonna be totally fine. I just wish that the disc actually flew a little nicer personally. Very sorry for what's about to happen to you, buddy. Geez, I'm throwing this thing pretty dang hard. If this doesn't break here, it's gonna be hard to break this thing on a tree. It is 65 degrees out today, so warmer than typical. Oh, I did warp it though. So obviously you throw your disc into a tree really hard. We'd rather it warp than it break, but this is the warpage that we're looking at after 4 throws. That is a breaking point, it seems. It seems I might be able to crack it there, which obviously throw something hard enough, it's gonna happen, but that is not ideal. I feel like I'm gripping it in the same spot and therefore probably hitting in the same spot on the tree. It's taking a beating. The only thing I do see is it's consistently folding up slightly. The softer plastic is gonna be bendy more than this one, and this is gonna be breaking more. And so it wouldn't make sense for it to like break this way, where the bottom part breaks down, because it's not like elastic. It's just softer, and so it would make sense that it's gonna break and bend this way. So it's gonna bend up. So that might make this disc beat in faster than other discs because of the plastic dichotomy, and it might make something beat in slower or opposite if you have the soft plastic on the bottom. That would be interesting. It's not like consistently up, 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 but this part is higher of a parting line now. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely see a little bit of warpage when you look at it from this angle. I haven't experienced this with other discs, but I also don't think I've done this test with other discs as much as this. I am making a very warped frisbee last throw. Let's see what we can do it. It does not break. That's to be expected, I'd say. The parting line, the plastic fusion process seems to be solid. And frankly, I can probably freaking bend this backwards. I think there's a name for that, like old school stuff. I mean, it's come back a little bit, but it definitely still has some warp to it. I don't think it'll be easy to break this disc. It might warp easier than others. Here, I'll give 4 throws. That's when I started to notice it with this salt. I don't want to, but we'll see what happens. I actually did 5 because a couple of them glanced. But this one does not seem to have changed even after those throws, which is the same amount that it took to warp the other one. So I'm guessing it is a plastic fusion process that will make it warp faster, especially for a premium plastic. But don't throw it with 400 feet of power into a tree a bunch of times, and you probably will be fine. Now let's see what the warp even did to this thing. One final throw. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been very interesting. I like doing these a little bit more in-depth, interesting style reviews, as well as all my other type of reviews. Just depends on what I think is interesting about the disc. And this one is very warped for that many throws into trees, which I guess makes sense when you have 2 different plastics that bond together. They don't have to break, but the warping happens way easier. That's not what I expected at all. All right, that pavilion, the second one one out there, 472 feet away. See how this flies? I'm just gonna try to throw it similar. Feels weird. Hey, real quick, before this final throw with this disc, I wanna give a massive shout out to Clash and any company like them who are trying to innovate in disc golf. Know the risks that come with that, especially being a smaller company, and is willing to send this stuff out to be tested by people to just put out to hopefully tens of thousands of people. So massive shout out to them for that. I'm excited for them to continue innovating and to continue reviewing all of it. Very exciting company, very cool concept. Execution, we'll have to end up seeing as the regular runs get sent out to people, but back to that throw, it was cool. Might be a little flippier. It's past that tree. What's that tree, 420? Yeah, 4 trunk is 423, so that went 440. Thank you guys so much. Bye.